Hello and welcome to this very special show. Imagine a gender equal world, a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination, a world that's diverse, equitable, and inclusive, a world where difference is valued and celebrated. Together, we can forge women's equality. Well, this year, once again, we come together to celebrate International Women's Day, and this time I have a panel of women achievers who, from their own experience and expertise, will give us a sense of where we are and where we need to go. Well, International Women's Day, as you all know, is a global day which celebrates the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. The day also marks a call to action for accelerating women's equality, be it corporate or the rural setup. Well, let me introduce and bring in my panelists who will be joining me. Kaveri Bamzai, she's the member steering committee of CII Foundation Women Exemplar Program. She's also an author and columnist, as you all know. Rumjum Chatterjee, member steering committee of CII Foundation Women Exemplar Program and co-founder and managing trustee of the InfraVision Foundation. Smita Agarwal, director and CFO, PTC Industry. She's also the national chairperson, CII Indian Women Network. Well, ladies, thank you very much for spending time and talking to me about, women equality and lots of interesting points that we're going to discuss through this course of conversation. Welcome on the show. Thank you indeed for your time. Kaveri, let me begin by asking you, if we look back at the last decade and, there's so much that we've talked about. And I think the time now is to understand where we are, what are the significant pivots that we've seen in women empowerment, or perhaps things that we need to still do to ensure that this is the equitable world as we talk about. So your own sense, your own observations, what's happened in the past and what needs to be done now.
Well, I think we have, as the cliche goes, come a long way. And I think, especially in the last decade after the Nirbhaya agitation, the changes in laws that we saw were very significant. And it has really made a deep, deep impact on young working women, especially in the corporate setup, where they now feel empowered enough to at least come forward and talk about sexual misconduct that they may have experienced at some point or the other. That's one. I think the second important change that I've seen is the representation of women in popular culture. Bollywood gets a bad rep, and so does cinema in general. But I think it has actually represented women in a far more equal and sometimes, even champion the cause of women, and it has made an impact. You cannot be what you cannot see, as I always say. And if you do see women in positions of power, making a difference to society in popular culture, it makes a difference to the way you can be. And I think the third most significant change that I've seen is the participation of women in sport. And I think that is something that we don't acknowledge enough. I think the last decade has seen an enormous, outpouring of women who've taken to all forms of sport, whether it's wrestling or hockey or boxing. And they've come from corners and parts of India that, we didn't even know how to spell. And I think that has made a significant difference in the way sport is now seen as a huge way for women to mobilize themselves, to come forward, to rise to the top. And, when you look at the kind of agitation that you saw recently of the women wrestlers about their federation, you can see that it has taken them a decade to voice their angst against misogyny, but it has happened. And, when someone like Vinesh Phogat, who I deeply, deeply admire, says that she did that because she saw her niece getting into the same profession, and she couldn't bear the thought that her niece would have to suffer the same kind of abuse that she did.
Sure.
I think that tells you how much, these are women from villages in Haryana, which is supposed to be one of the most backward in terms of all the social and human development indices. And then when you see them speak like this, I think it's a terrific thing. So I think these are the three major things that I've seen in the last decade.
And I can't agree more with you on the fact that we are seeing women voicing and really coming
Yeah.
out and talking about issues which wasn't the thing of the past. And I think that's a very welcome change, clearly. Rumjimji, I want to come to you to get your views on the similar points that Kaveri was making, but your own observations, your own assessment of where we are and where we need to go.
Sure. I think I'll just add to what Kaveri has already said. I think sports, we have seen significant, shall I say, moving forward as far as women are concerned. I have also noticed that on many other fronts. If you are flying, from one city to another,
Yeah.
the chances that you'll be flown by a lady pilot is something to be really celebrating. More and more we see of that. The legal profession has seen significant amount of women, coming into the fold. So on some of these professional areas, I think we are seeing women. In the corporate world, I think two significant things have happened. One is that in 2015, as you know, the law about having independent directors, that hasn't moved the needle. I think the jury is still out, but at least that is a step forward. Also, we have certainly got a lot of the corporates sensitized about the areas of, sexual harassment at the workplace. So even if we haven't made a huge difference, people, I definitely believe, have been sensitized. But according to me, I think the biggest contribution for women's empowerment is taking place in the rural zone. And that is something that I think we have to watch, follow, and hopefully, instead of a trickle down as we are all used to seeing, it's going to be a trickle up for India.
Okay, wonderful. So there are some positive points that you talked about in terms of women participation. And rural is actually giving a lead here, which is quite heartening to see, as you talked about. Smita, corporate world, and I think the whole conversation for many years, and I know this has been an ongoing thing where we say, well, in spirit, we don't see as much as it is on paper. They're still minority as far as women are concerned. And when you go to the boardrooms, you may not be taken as seriously, etc., etc. I mean, that's largely was the conversation earlier. Now, do you see that change? Because you yourself witness it day in and out. Are corporates more willing to actually take women seriously and take their advice seriously, take their input seriously?
Sure. Thank you, Swati. And I'd actually, welcome the question that you've shared with me. I think what has changed very significantly in the past decade is the fact that we've now understood that there is an economic argument for women, more and more women, to be in the workplace, whether it's in business or even in rural areas and all across, and also bringing more women in leadership. We are all the time talking about India becoming a 5 trillion economy, and then, within the next 7 years, actually aiming for India to become a 10 trillion economy. You can't have those kind of targets and goals set if you're going to ignore 50% of your population, especially a huge amount of talent pool. Plus, the kind of technological developments, the sort of innovation that we need as a country to progress and to actually make bigger strides will only come when you have a much more diverse workforce. And women bring in their own perspective. And they really add to the richness and to the quality of output that you are able to bring. So bringing more and more women into the workplace has almost, it's become a no-brainer, and I think corporates understand it very well. Politically, we've started to understand how important it is. I mean, you can just see the changes that have happened across the country in the panchayat system. So many more women pradhans that you see across the country now. The other very big thing that I think has happened is the fact that we have actually enabled more and more, we've created an enabling ecosystem for more and more women to participate in the economic development of our country. So whether it was, something as basic as the Swachh Bharat movement, through which we built mass toilets across the country, and we had separate toilets for women, so that was a big thing that gave access to women to workplaces, even to education. So earlier you have in rural areas, girls not being able to go to schools just because beyond a certain age there is no separate toilet, and that is a huge challenge for them. So now that you have at least leveled this out, and not a small step, a huge one that has been taken in the past decade to give this access to women.
Okay.
Add to that the sort of laws that Kaveri was talking about in terms of safety, in terms of the policing that we've started to do, the separate police stations, the sort of security and support that women can hope to get. And that is something that is, as a sensitization happening at corporates also, and as a society also, I think we're evolving to understand that. Significant steps being taken, and hopefully women are not there just as a placeholder in the corporate world, but actually contributing and adding deeply.
Okay, contributing deeply in a meaningful way, as we talked about. So the context is now set. I've understood from each of you your views on where we are right now and what has happened in the last decade, which has helped us, improve women participation and contribution in all, economic development of the country and society. Now, just to understand, where do we lack still? What are the areas of work? I think that now needs to be understood. Where we've reached is great, but what needs to be done to take the next step? Because this situation that we are in can easily be held on for the next 10 years, if we don't improve some of the hurdles that may perhaps be still there. So each of you here, Kaveri, to start with you, your thoughts on what are the areas that we still need to work on, very specifically when it comes to policy decisions or even corporates, including those small little changes that can help aid women participation even more, because we still have a long way to go.
Well, one, I think corporates should cease to put money in trendy and fashionable areas, areas that are fashionable with the establishment at a particular point, and therefore, you see a huge chunk of CSR funding going there. For instance, I think Swachh Bharat was a great program, but it needn't have swallowed up all the CSR funding. When I look at, the Zilla Swachh Bharat Prerak program, which Tata Trust sponsored, which had actually 600 volunteers across India for the Swachh Bharat mission. I wonder why that could not have been replicated, why that could not have used something like the Women Exemplar program. I'm tom-tomming the CII Foundation Women Exemplar program here. But why that could have not, funded the Women Exemplar program on a mass scale? Because look at the kind of multiplier effect that would have had. Some of the Women Exemplars we've chosen have, done work in financial inclusion, in health services, in creating ponds. That whole idea that the farmer is a man, it's a misnomer. 65% of Indian farmers are actually women. So what I'm saying is that the corporate CSR funding needs to go beyond the trendy and fashionable areas. It should look at women programs. There are enough, starting with the Women Exemplar. They can start funding those. It should look at areas like the Anganwadis and the Anganwadi helpers, for instance. We have something like 25 lakh Anganwadi workers and Anganwadi helpers who get, as little as 4,500 a month. There's no reason for them to be paid so little. During COVID, we saw the kind of work that they did just using a smartphone. They reached areas where doctors could not, where nurses could not. That's the kind of impact they had during COVID. We need to build on that and create a movement which is far more lasting and has far greater depth. And I think something like the Anganwadi workers is a tremendous program that exists.
Okay.
It just needs to be funded better. It needs to be strengthened.
Okay.
And that brings that actually ties in with what Rumjum said, that we are seeing a trickle up movement. But if it does not get the kind of funding
Fizzle out.
and the support it needs, it's just going to fizzle out.
Okay, fair enough. Point taken. So some of the other programs, not so glamorous ones, but very
Yeah.
important and significant ones, one needs to
Exactly.
put the money.
And these are in areas of health and education, which are really vital for the country.
Absolutely. So those are some of the points that you've made. Rumjum ji, aapko, what do you think and what is your input to this?
So I think that corporate contribution is definitely coming in for rural development. And I do see that many corporates are focusing on women and the improvement in the quality of life of the communities as a major chunk of that. So most initiatives are built around that. And all those projects will definitely have a positive impact on the way that women are, particularly in the rural areas, right? I want to also highlight the fact that whether it is government schemes like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, or it is Ujjwala, or it is Nal Se Jal, etc., all of these are also directed to improve the life of women, right? So the fact that we are focusing on certain policies that can make a positive impact on women is a good thing.
Okay.
But I think where we need to do a lot of work still is improving the safety of women in cities. I would hesitate to say whether cities is the only problem and not in the rural, but I think it's more pronounced as far as the urban areas is concerned. And without that, you cannot expect women to come out and work
Absolutely.
and be a part of the workforce, in large numbers. That's one. And finally, I would say that we have to contend with this issue of mindset change. And yes, we have been saying that for the last many decades. And I guess we will have to continue to focus on that for the next few decades as well. But without that, I don't see women coming up and being a part of the workforce in a sustainable manner, right? Going ahead from here.
Okay, fair enough. And good points really covered, where you see the hurdle, you see the problem, and you think that should be addressed and taken and worked upon. Smita, your inputs and your thoughts on what needs to be done now to bring in more women. You said it makes economic sense. It's a no-brainer. Everybody understands. Yet we see, I think, the reluctances from maybe women themselves who are not coming out there and taking those opportunities that are for them. So maybe addressing those issues. What's your thought?
Absolutely, Swati, and I'm going to pick up from exactly where Rumjumji left off. And the fact is, what you said also, the biggest thing is the mindset change. And the thing that you touched upon as well. So, under CII Indian Women Network, we do a lot of work with women in the workplace. And we've been sort of also carrying out a lot of these surveys to try and understand and see what is happening. And, one of the very interesting things that I'd like to share with you is that there is still so much of a gap in how the Indian men as well as the women think. So, for example, 40% of the men in our country still feel that it's a man's job to earn money and take care of the household. 45% of men think that it is natural for men to earn more money than women. And 35% of women also agree. Of the people that we surveyed, 35% of the women echo the fact that it's okay for a man to earn more than a woman for the same job that they're doing. 40% of men believe that men are better executives than women, and 27% of women agree. So this is something that we really need to work upon, where that whole transformation needs to happen from an internal perspective as to how we think about ourselves and how we feel that our capabilities are when we come to the workforce. That is one. And
Yes.
that's, like Rumjumji said, it's a very deep-seated thing and it will take years to work on. And I think as a country, we've done...
to a lot to be blamed here. But anyway, yes.
But just to, on the flip side, as a country, we are an example in terms of how women achievements can actually drive a nation. And in the Mars mission and the work that women did under COVID, we have all of those stories to fall back upon. The other thing that also is a huge challenge is what we call the 3 M's of a woman's life in the workforce, which is the marriage, maternity, and the menopause. And these are the 3 times that women are most likely to fall off the workforce. So what is it that we can do in terms of policy interventions, both at the government and administrative levels, and also through corporates, so that when women are at these 3 stages in their lives, when either they get married and then they don't come back to work again, or when they go through childbirth and when they have children and then again they don't, they think about giving up their careers, and finally at stages of menopause. So these are the 3 points in life where if we had the correct policies
and support,
then that's
yes,
support system, absolutely. So
okay, fair point. And I
right.
think all of us in that sense can possibly people can see for themselves. It's a woman's story which can be, emulated. I mean, not exactly, but, you can drive some kind of inspiration on how, if one could do, if somebody is aspirational and wants to do something, you can always learn from each other. I think learning from each other's stories is also one way. That's something that I just thought was one of the ways that we can inspire women to continue to stay and follow their heart. Very quickly now, to just summarize and wrap up before, as we are going to be closing this session, all of you all, one bit of input in terms of the technology help that we are now going to, we have already seen how COVID helped a lot of women and in general everybody to take up things that they were reluctant to and help themselves progress more. Here, what is it that you think, each of you, technology can play as a role in the lives of women and how they can uplift and use it to their advantage? Kaveri?
Yeah, I think quickly, what I want to say is that, there was a piece of data that came out yesterday, which really puts this into perspective. 53% of urban women do not step out of their houses even once a day. That tells you exactly how limited they are to their own environment and how difficult it is for them to enter the public space. So I think that is very important. That's why technology is very important, to enable them to work from home. And regardless of the kind of innate suspicion that corporates seem to have about work from home, COVID taught us that it is possible, but they seem to be reversing that. I think they need to understand that technology is very important, especially in an environment where going into the public domain is difficult for women for various reasons. Secondly, I want to raise the point that take the point that Smita made, which is about menopause as a limiting factor. I think we need to understand that menopause is actually a liberating factor. I think the grey girl power that we have in India is tremendous, and I don't think we're using that enough. I think if we're able to understand that these are women who have mostly completed their responsibilities at home in terms of childcare, have completed their responsibilities towards their parents, completed their responsibilities towards their husbands. There's a tremendous, and they're living longer, they're living healthier, they're very, very useful to society. I think we need to use that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, so much experience. And really, even if they have managed households, I mean, it is like managing a small corporate startup, right? So I think those women are not looked at enough. And I think we really need policies that are able to use them as to further various public services, and they don't necessarily have to do it voluntarily. They don't necessarily have to just volunteer for it. They can be paid for it as well, and I think that should be recognized.
Okay, that's a very
great girl power
plug the gap and really utilize our way for that input.
Absolutely.
Rumjum.
Well, as far as technology is concerned, a few years ago, I think we were all agreed that it can enable women to work from home, and there is a market available that they can certainly, kind of address. Many corporates were hiring the services of women who worked from home, whether it is on design aspects or it is, even backroom work that they can do from home, etc. But what has happened during the pandemic years is that the whole world had taken to working from home. As a result, I would believe that the women lost out. That today many corporates are definitely looking at work from home opportunities, but many of the men are addressing those. And there is a statistics that confirms this, to say that more women lost their jobs during the pandemic than the men did.
Okay.
So that is of concern.
Okay.
But if you look at the way that technology has enabled rural women to actually transact more economic activity, it's amazing what it can do.
Okay.
Right? So I'm very bullish on that front.
Okay, fair enough. And quickly, Smita, your bits.
Yes, so I'm going to actually sort of, I mean, it's too huge. There's so much that technology can do for women and can help. But I'm going to sort of drill it down to 3 points. One is the whole skilling, education, training function. That gives huge access to women. They can now get access to all kinds of skilling programs, to even education and all of that. So technology is a huge enabler for that, for women who don't, who can't travel, who can't maybe even go out of their homes, all of that bit. And there's so much that I can explain, but I'm going to keep it quick. The second bit is the safety. And that's a huge thing. Technology has now helped us to feel more safe, just, because we have a lot of access to maybe safety apps, and the fact that we are, we've got Google Maps and all of those things, and we have all these ways and methodologies to track and to ensure safety of women in a much better way, whether it is even through surveillance systems and how many, smart cities we hope to get in the country, and all of that. So that's again a big thing. And these are the two biggest deterrents for Indian women today to get into the workforce. The last one, and I think much more broader one, is the fact that yes, it helps tremendously in the work-life balance. You can manage both responsibilities. It gives you great digital access in terms of a lot of things we can do online, sitting at home, whether it's shopping, grocery, managing help, things like that, and then also take care of our responsibilities at work through this. One thing that also comes in tandem with this is the entire system of digital access that has been given to women now. And we know that the women have been the largest beneficiaries of programs such as the Mudra Yojana and the toilet programs and everything. And just because now they are in the digital financial ecosystem where they have bank accounts, they have access directly to get money into their accounts. One of the very astonishing things is that more women have now the assets. So all the programs that were started about the Awas Yojana by the Prime Minister, where the houses were being allotted, most of them were done in the names of women. And when women own assets, the incidence of violence against them is proven to come down. Through surveys, we found that. So this is again huge enablers. Technology can be a huge enabler for women.
Technology, indeed, yes, absolutely. I think it's played a big role, and it has a big role to be played going forward from here. Good thing is we are adopting that I would say platform to our benefit, and that needs to be done. All right, it was lovely speaking to each of you. Thank you so much for your inputs and your thoughts on this very interesting conversation on Women's Day that we are having. Thank you, each of you, for your time. Thanks.